if I take all these classes that require for a business administration minor, it's included in my professional electives for my kinesiology program.
Right.
So I could technically just add on a minor while doing my kinesiology.
That'd be good. I don't like how this looks. Huh?
What is JREF?
Journalism.
No, I don't want to take a journalism class. It's either English, philosophy.
What did you just feel? Philosophy.
I cannot say that word.
What the fuck? Choose a different philosophy.
345.
What's it say? You can click on it, can't you? Look it up. So I'm gonna read that tonight.
I want to check this sports nutrition.
It says that
first one because I have 2 exams this week. So I'm hyper-focused and stressed about physics and differential equations right now.
Hello.
All right, David. All right. All right.
Hello there.
Pass the black boxes. Ooh. All right, cool. All right, we had a little bit of technical difficulties getting the computer booted up, so it's about ready to start.
As long as I wasn't the cause of it, I'm fine with it.
No, it's all your fault. We always blame it on the guy who was many thousands of miles away.
Yeah, exactly.
Accountable. Okay, so this will be the first time I'm actually seeing this. Good. So what action adventure? Before we start, I want to just go over a couple things. Mainly, this is our last class as far as just kind of lecture and all, go over a genre. And so we're going to start next Monday with your guys' presentations. And then the next 5 classes, we're going to have 4 students a day for that. So please do, and that is everyone, also you online people, I hope you can all hear me. Can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
You determine if you prefer to go either virtual or in person, which means you're here like these 5 people are right now. It doesn't matter to me, and if it's either or, just put an E, and that way I can make the schedule. I'll have that out as soon as I got everybody's desire. Now, there's 6 of you that still need to meet with me. 4 of you are signed up. There were 2. Taylor is one of them that had to confuse this time to talk about Star Wars. So I added two times on Thursday. So it's going to be a marathon on Thursday because I've got 6 hours of meeting you guys. But I can't be tomorrow because my other classes, they're having a speech contest and I have to be there as a judge at 7 o'clock. So we're going to do it Thursday, and then following Monday, we're going to start. You guys will present, and we'll kind of sit back and watch, ask a few questions, and have a grand old time learning about your films. But interesting enough, we're going to talk about probably what I think, and I know David agrees, the most, I won't say significant genre of the 80s, but probably the most quality films are in that category. The fact that we're not even talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, it didn't make the cut, and it's just because it kind of covered Spielberg already a little bit. And game changers were Road Warrior and Die Hard, and what David's going to go over exactly why. But interestingly enough, can you see this? Everybody see this? I was going through I'm moving and trying to sell my house and go through all that old stuff. I have this big thing of magazines. Entertainment Weekly from 2007. It's a 25 best action films. Geez, that's what we're talking about. So I went in there and said, what did they think? Back in ancient history when you were all little babies, right? Okay, so I go in there, and what's number 1? Die Hard of all time, okay? This is an ancient history. What's number 2? Alien. What's number 3? Raiders of the Lost Ark. What's number 4? Road Warrior. So I think we kind of nailed it. And out of 25, 1/3 of them are from the 80s. So this was a decade for action films. And that's as much as anything, I think the one with the teen films and the action films were so unique to defining this decade. And it was because action in the 70s was not as spectacular, and it started to get more spectacular. And it didn't have to, like French Connection and movies like that have a great car chase, but there's a lot of exposition going on to that. There's a plot, there's characters and stuff. Mad Max is just, I'm in a car chase from the beginning to the end, okay? You know, you want to get out of here, you talk to me, right? All right, so I'm gonna put up your PowerPoint and let
All right.
man from down under kind of, now, are we showing a clip? Tell me when we're doing this.
Yes, yes. If you'd like to start with a clip, it's the Die Hard one on the final page.
Okay, we'll start with that.
Wake everyone up.
What is it? I'm a Mac. What is that? Control C to copy this. Put it on here. And it's Control what? V. P? V.
After saving with customized car insurance from Liberty Mutual, I customize everything, like Marco's backpack.
Just for that, I'm not buying the damn insurance.
Yes, exactly.
Are you?
Die Hard.
All right, so that looks like the original. Oh, we get to see Goldfinger. Oh, no. All right. The original teaser for back in 1987 when they had, oh, that's such a good scene. That'll be fine, class of 11. Okay, David.
All right. Well, it used to be said that the definition of an intellectual was someone who could listen to the William Tell Overture and not think of the Lone Ranger. With that, and with my generation, it's very hard to hear Beethoven's Ode to Joy without thinking of Die Hard. So yeah, my little brother, 7 years younger, he's an actor, and he used to refer, even in when he was a child, to 80s action. And the more years went on, it used to irritate me. 80s action, 80s action. I was like, you always get good action in any decade. But actually, nowadays, as Brad was just reading out, people talk about 80s action. It was that era when that stuff was just the best of the best. So let's go to the key films that, which is slide number 2, that we're looking at. And I'll just give you a one-liner because I don't want to burn all my time. I've prepared a clip for the very end of this. It ends with the biggest explosion you've ever seen, which you have to do if you present this stuff. But it's so yes, Smokey and the Bandit, actually 1977. And I'll just describe it as if there's somebody who hasn't seen it. The good old boys smuggling beer across the border, and they've got their trucks and they've got their CB radios, and the leading man is very engaging. Spy Who Loved Me was the third Roger Moore Bond film and his personal favorite. There are also many of us who believe the entire Bond story is told in the opening pre-titled action of that film. Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is now ironically a classic in its own right, but in fact it was a tribute to the classics, because not all the filmmakers who got started in the 70s were, you know, angry young men out to revolutionize anything. And Spielberg and Lucas absolutely made tribute after tribute to the classics, like Casablanca and Treasure of Sierra Madre in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Scarface, controversial, but they played it on Miami. I thought it worked very well. And anyway, an eminently quotable film, passes my memeability index handsomely. Say hello to my little friend. Beverly Hills Cop got Eddie Murphy started, and he was not originally cast for it, but who can imagine it without him? And talk about a legacy. That man is still working to this day. Top Gun. It's the one uniquely in that list that's got military cooperation, and they always have a certain mood. Like the military is always right. Our regulations are never questioned. All our guys are perfect. And as long as you can get with that, it's the most spectacular thing you've ever seen, because who'd been on top of an aircraft carrier before with, IMAX cameras and stuff? The Untouchables was one that Brian De Palma, the director's friend, Steven Spielberg, tapped Brian on the shoulder and said, why don't you do more films like that? But it's probably easier said than done, because there's a lot of talent came together on that to give it a classic feel. Die Hard, we're going to cover later, but it's one of the great cat and mouse games in cinema or theater. And The Road Warrior, the one that's like Blade Runner, ever afterwards, anytime somebody does the post-apocalypse, it's very hard not to see Mad Max in it. Now, has anybody not seen one of those films, or has everybody seen all of them?
Let's go back to the list here.
Just curious.
You've seen it. Okay, a few of you have seen it. Okay, it was really key in like the 70s car chase movie. 60s car chase movies, actually, somebody's being chased by the cops. They tried to keep relatively realistic. This thing was just kind of a complete lark. He's getting chased because he's got Coors beer. Okay, as if you're gonna like destroy cop cars and then for a truckload of Coors beer. Okay, but that was the story. Who saw Spy Who Loved Me? You're doing it, aren't you? Yeah. Okay. It's and she's never seen a James Bond movie. This is her first one, so she's got a lot of catching up to do.
I've seen one before it, but I was like half asleep. So.
Okay, well, you have to wake up for it this time. But obviously, the reason we have a Bond film in there for action in particular is back in 1962, when this character kind of came to prominence. By 64, when Goldfinger came out, and it was a kind of a thing. No, you didn't see action films with spectacular action. You just didn't see it. And it took the rest of the genre a while to catch up. Bond was kind of it for almost the whole 60s. And then in the 70s, you started getting a lot of action films. But they still all look, you had your kind of low budget action, then you had your big budget action. And that's why when we get to Die Hard, it was like, it changed the way Bond made films. Because it was like, whoa, they out-bonded us here, okay? So now we've got to like up the game. So you'll see the stunts and whatever in the Pierce Brosnan and all the post Die Hard films way ramped up, and sometimes at the expense of character and plot. Okay, Raiders. You guys have all seen Raiders? All right. That's a crowd pleaser. As David said, really important as far as Steven Spielberg, backstory, wanted to do a Bond film. He went to Broccoli and said, can I do a Bond film? I just did Jaws. I'm the hottest director. He's like, you're not British. And Bond has to be British, and our directors up to that point were all Brits. So he went back to Lucas and said, I just got this by the Bond people. Lucas like, we got money. Let's make our own Bond film. Okay, when we create our character, they got Lawrence Kasdan, hottest writer at the time. Harrison Ford, hot from Star Wars. We made our own, and so they created their own entity. But it was because he wanted to do a Bond film. And if you notice in Raiders, before the credits, you have the boulder chasing them and all that. That's called the pre-title sequence. You can say from Spy Who Loved Me, got a great pre-title sequence. Bond, I heard that. You didn't see anything before the titles for at least 15 years, but Bond films did it from 1962 on. And then every action film, pretty much now every film does it. Scarface was kind of it was an over the top thing from Pacino. Again, if you're Brian De Palma, we got two films here, Scarface and The Untouchables, and they're very different, but they're both kind of gangster films. So interestingly, that was kind of wound up being his legacy. Who's seen Scarface? This one. What do you think of it?
I don't.
Pretty rough stuff, huh?
I don't like a lot of Pacino films.
Yeah, well, I love Pacino, The Godfather. I like him when he underplays, when he goes over the top. That's as over the top as you get. Burying your face in the mountain of cocaine is a little bit much. Okay? All right. Beverly Hills Cop. What'd you think?
It's been a while since I watched it. Isn't it kind of like funny?
It is,
Yeah,
it
that's
was-
what I remember.
It was taking the action genre, the cop genre, and starting to give levity into it, which Roger Moore brought to the Bond thing. So this decade was played on as much for laughs. So you're not going to find too many of these films that don't have light moments, where it's not just all hard boiled, whatever. And some of the cop films of the previous decades are no nonsense. And here there was a little bit of a wink at the camera. Hey, this is just a movie. This is entertaining. Lethal Weapon, we've seen that. Okay, they made a whole series of these three of them. Mel Gibson, it was a buddy picture. Mel Gibson was just coming to Hollywood after he made a big star out of himself in Road Warrior. And You Were Living Dangerously and some of these others. So he decided, well, I don't want to be an Aussie, so he kind of developed this kind of bizarre American accent. And he played this character that, like, no matter what, he could fall 5 stories off a building and he'd brush himself off. And that became the sort of, and I thought they did it well in Die Hard, where McClane, you could tell he was hurt, but he still pretty did some fabulous stuff. And with Lethal Weapon, I mean, he would have a shoulder that keeps coming out of socket. He just push it back in himself and then go fight guys. So it was kind of over the top. It was a huge hit. Who's seen Top Gun? Who's going to go see the new one? Yeah, it's a good looking trailer. So it's kind of like, yeah, they waited for a classic to come out for the new one. Yeah. So long time in the making. Untouchables. Anybody see that? It's a good film. Sean Connery wins his only Academy Award for it. And De Niro plays Al Capone. I mean, it's really good stuff. And the other two. So let's get it back. So we're going to go to key action about the creators.
Correct. All right. So I became very conscious, even in my last presentation, that giving a whole list of names that we've heard of all, but it starts to just become names to people. So there's the list on screen, but just a general statement about the 5 areas. The producers, I don't think generally get enough credit for really generating these projects from the beginning, from the very first impetus, often to do it, and they're the last people to let it go. And there are these creative producers and who absolutely imprint their own style on something. And Jerry Bruckheimer, for instance, he's sitting next to a couple of images out of Top Gun, and his stuff, I remember, was the hottest stuff. It was in your face and hardcore action, very rah-rah. Joel Silver, I'm sort of reading my names backwards. He's a guy, well, The Matrix made his, well, it didn't make his fame, but so it certainly sustained it. He was the producer of Die Hard. And his personality, when you listen to those who worked on it, it's just all over it. And George Lucas, of course, I mean, a pretty creative guy in his own right, but he stood back to let Spielberg direct Indiana Jones for sure. Now, directors, I tend to think film directors get more credit than they deserve, because people can't absorb, that many people worked on it. But each of those that I named, apart from maybe John Badham, have a particular style, and they all had hands in really the biggest action films of that decade. Screenwriters don't often get a flag waved for them, but the professor mentioned Lawrence Kasdan. He wrote Empire Strikes Back and actually co-wrote that, and then wrote Raiders back to back, and is still writing to this day. David Mamet, out of plays, but he could brought something brand new to the Untouchables, and apparently was put through hell, 8 drafts, and he didn't know if he was Arthur or Martha, but he's the voice behind everybody's voices in the Untouchables, and that's why it's full of great lines. And Oliver Stone, who, of course, before he was a film director, he was just a film writer. That's how he made his reputation. He wrote Scarface. On the stunt coordinator, stuntmen, armorers, drivers, well, you just sort of assume they'll all do their job right. But I felt it's worth mentioning that if you want to know what goes wrong when you have a bad or unqualified armorer, when people are not following all the protocols of these very particular trades, you get Rust. That the film where Alec Baldwin thought he had a cold gun because that's what he'd been told, and aimed it, which is a dumb thing to do, at somebody, thinking he was going to fire a blank, and shot them. That the information has come out that the organization of that set was just appalling, and the things they were doing with those guns that you should never do with guns. We don't think about it, so it's another one of those thankless professions. All the people who get work whenever there's an action film and make the dangerous the stuff happen safely. I don't think I'll bother going through, the actors' personalities, except as individuals, other than to say everybody's got a different personality, and that's what you get with an action star. I mean, I must admit, Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal buck my theory, which is you have to have a big personality, just like a normal movie star, to make it in action films, because I see no personality in them. But all these guys, these 80s fellas, many of them, I found as many pictures of them as I could. They all had that. And so you follow them anyway. You'd follow them if they were doing their shopping. So it's all the more fun when they're blowing the world to hell. And with that, I thought I'd jump to Die Hard, which is often fingered as the best of the best. Well, I mean, it's like all of the stuff with the best characters. Die Hard came from literature. It was a book called Nothing Lasts Forever, by Roderick Thorpe. I mean, I'd never heard of the guy, but his book got optioned, but it was quite a different story, at least in tone. And I got what I'm about to tell you from John McTiernan, the director, in his director's commentary, who said that if you tell a story about terrorists taking over a building, they're horrible people, they're doing horrible things, and the hero has to be even more horrible to beat him. And it's all going to be very grim about desperate people doing horrible things for 2 hours for a popcorn movie for Christmas. So he looked for any chance he could to find joy in moments and in interactions and in the music, and Ode to Joy, which the composer had to really be wrestled to do because he considered it a travesty, but it works so well. And if you look at it through those eyes, it's why it is one of the most fun action movies ever. And yeah, I do think of the 70s, and cops would tend to be very serious about their jobs, but you got the wisecracks now, and I don't know who started it, probably James Bond, but the wisecracking John McClane is quotable, of course, to this day. It drew its inspirations as a film, I would say, from heist movies, because of course Hans is not a terrorist. He is an exceptional thief. Since I'm moving up to kidnapping, madam, you should be more polite. He's one of the great villains, and it's really Hans who's the protagonist. John's an antagonist. John gets in the way of Hans's plans. It's really Hans's movie and the villain's movie, in tune with the old Alfred Hitchcock aphorism that if the villain works, the picture will work. And everybody loves Alan Rickman in that role. Maybe being whimsical, I also thought Tom and Jerry cartoons, cat and mouse, and if McClane's the cat, and then all the mice are running around this enclosed space, and like submarine movies, because it is limited, you can't get out. It becomes a real pressure cooker, and skilled people can do wonderful things just with these theatrical arts of how to write something and how to act it. In terms of the production, I've talked about Joel Silver, and people knew when offered the choice between regular sounding machine guns and ones that were extra loud, he'd go the extra loud ones. So much so that Bruce Willis apparently lost some of his hearing while shooting that. And Alan Rickman, if you see him, whenever he's got a gun and if he has to fire it, he puts it kind of out from his head. He hated guns, but there's the actor for you. You'd never know it. This thing about the shooting brought up something that was another challenge, which was, that just strikes me as extraordinary and also very 80s, when these giant corporations had sort of reassembled themselves, because the studios had been huge monoliths, all vertically integrated from the cinema right up to the production, and they were forced to split apart as a monopoly. But now you had these global corporations, like Sony bought Columbia, and somewhere else gigantic as a corporation bought another studio. And you had Fox Plaza being the place where it was shot. And that was just under construction and belonged to the same corporation that was funding the film. So the filmmakers thought, well, they'll, make it easy for us. We're making it easy for them. We're in a company building. But apparently the production was charged for every little thing, including getting complaints from the few people who did have offices that you're making too much noise upstairs, and even things that they hadn't damaged yet, they were made to pay for. It was just a very odd insight into how big that corporation was. So they really had a tough time in their own company's building, which strikes me funny. And the word funny comes up, of course, with all the characters. And the part of the joy is so many of them are funny. And actually the writer, Silifant, I think is his name, he complained that, that his characters are being made to look ridiculous. The guy, Dwayne, who's in charge of things down on the ground, the useless cop. But this all works beautifully, and the FBI guys are stupid assholes and so forth. But I realized at a certain point that is a theme, and it's very relatable and very satisfying. It's always the authority figures who screw things up, and it's always some working man who knows how things work because he's been doing it for years, who knows how it works. So Al, the street cop, he knows that John is on the level. And the guy who's down under a manhole cover, who says, I could just cut one wire, I don't need to shut off the building. And he's shut down by the FBI. If the little guy had been listened to, Hans wouldn't have gotten away with it. So all the time, and of course, John McClane, the ultimate, I'm just a guy who came to the party. He's the one who does all the good while all the authorities do is mess things up. So it's got that little subversive thing that everybody loves. And I decided to list, yes, production triumphs, not only the creation of a classic villain, but the fact he's surrounded by fun people. And Ellis, the stupid businessman. Hey, babe, I do $1 million deals for breakfast. I think I can handle this Euro trash, all that jazz. I saw that film in Stuttgart, and weren't the Germans satisfied to see him get popped?
The guy who played
Ellis?
yeah,
Hart Bachner, that's right.
I was film that did make the cut called Breaking Away with about bicycle racing and it's late 70s. It's very much a kid, because Dennis Quaid, so that is one of his first roles. Hart Bachner plays just a teenage version of the same jerk. So, tell this guy, like, okay, we need a jerk. Okay, get Hart Bachner. He's a good looking guy, but there was something about him that said, really obnoxious frat boy type. And again, the coked up one here in this case. So it's just a little, sometimes these little character actors, their little bit make the film as memorable as anything. Something about the special effects I want to ask David, because I had heard the building, for a movie like that, they usually build like a model of the building. Fires, I heard those were really pyrotechnics, really coming out of that Fox building at the time. Is that true?
Yeah, the explosions at the top. Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us back to that the producer.
The building by doing that. That's what's crazy, because it looks like the building's getting destroyed, but somehow this was just they had the science down to where maybe they scorched the glass a little bit, but that was about it.
Yeah, and anything that they destroyed, they would probably have to repay double price from the deals that Fox Property Company was putting them through. But yeah, I think it was understood from the beginning. It's a building under construction, so go for it. And also this real for real thing. I mean, again, it's 80s money. I always feel shallow mentioning it, but it makes a difference to the creative side when suddenly James Cameron, famous for the fact of saying, no, I don't want to model. We go out and build the Titanic, or we'll put 5 submarines in front of the camera, real ones. And,
Terminator not make it in our list. Did it get cut out somehow? Terminator should be in there too, guys.
Yes.
It does. It deserves. It was a very important film. Made Arnold. I don't know how it got cut, but just so in case you're saying, "What about Terminator?" We didn't think of that. Somehow it just.
But that's why I slipped Schwarzenegger into the previous.
I would replace Scarface with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh well.
Terminator is action from the beginning to the end. And T2 was kind of like Road Warrior right after. They actually had a budget. There's a film called Mad Max that Dave's going to tell you about that started with Mad Max, but they had no money to make it. It was made for so cheap. And they had to subtitle it because the Australian accents were so thick that we couldn't understand it in this country. So they subtitled, and then they dubbed it, which was even worse. So by the time they made Road Warrior, they said, okay, we're still going to speak Australian, but slow it down so the Americans can understand it, because we're going to actually release this throughout the world and not just for an Australian audience. Are you ready to go on to Road Warrior?
Yes, sir. The funny thing is that gradually went away, and in 88 through 90 even, there were still a few people who I would bump into, and they really had a problem understanding what I said. And I remember being in that state, Tennessee, years ago, and I ran into a lady at a gas station that I had to communicate with, and she seriously could not understand me. But it gets rarer and rarer. Yeah. Anyway, what am I doing? We're going around the world here, and yes, well, beloved around the world is Die Hard. I think that's a heck of a triumph. It's one of those evergreen questions. Also, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? And controversial. Bruce Willis said, "No, it's not." Well, he's wrong.
It is a Christmas movie.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. You win.
It took like years to decide that, though, because I never heard that till like 2 or 3 years ago. So it's like, it would definitely had a delayed response, not like exactly the cringe, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But it takes place at Christmas. A lot of movies take place at Christmas that aren't considered Christmas movies.
True.
Just Secret Service, the Bond film, is all at Christmas. There's even a Christmas song, and nobody calls that a Christmas movie. So for some reason, because it's let it snow at the end, and it plays, and it's not snowing snow, it's snowing money.
Snowing money, exactly.
Clever, but hey, if more people watch it, it's a good film. So let's talk about Road Warrior.
Yes. Okay. Now, Road Warrior. I put it toward the end of the list, but it actually was close to the front. 1981, this came out, and this was I've just got to get my head around. You've just introduced it. Yes, Mad Max 1 was made and did business in Australia and particularly Japan, because the character of Max to them was a samurai, the same as to in our culture it's a cowboy, but the Japanese absolutely recognized it and absolutely embraced it, oddball and low budget as Mad Max 1 was. However, while we knew it as Mad Max 2, it released here as the Road Warrior, and it was, as you said, a whole different league, because this time Warner Brothers got behind it and put the money behind it. But it was still shot out Broken Hill. And now what separates it from your average action? What was it that made my friend Simon turn to me when we were both 12 and sitting in a cinema, and we about halfway through Mad Max 2, and he turns to me and goes, "This is actually good. This is for an Australian film." We kids were not that much into all the art stuff, but this one was seriously good. And it's a lot of things, and it's a lot of depth actually underneath some very hardcore, unrestrained action. So now I'll analyze in the conventional way we do. Inspirations. George Miller on Mad Max 4 on the Ultimate DVD actually releases a black and white version of the film. Why would you do that? It's because it's sort of a tribute of his to the works of Buster Keating, silent filmmaking. And silent filmmaking has to tell it all with pictures, and they did some incredible things with real vehicles back then. And so he's very much inspired by that. The Westerns, of course, you've got the sort of besieged ranch in the middle of all the criminals and out in the middle of nowhere, and they get a gun for hire who comes and takes on the bad guys for them. In terms of the visioning of the cars, Death Race 2000. I mean, I think it was as cheap as it sounds, but that was a sort of post-apocalyptic race. It just wasn't as well done. The Cars That Ate Paris was one of those arty Australian movies from the 70s. It was directed by Peter Weir, but it featured all these monster cars. And so that idea actually is in Australia. already, regardless of the filmmakers. Beware, because yeah, and Duel, of course, was Spielberg's in early 70s, just a truck chasing a man down. And I can't help but see angles from Duel in this. So it certainly had its, it didn't all come out of the blue. Those themes, though, are pretty deep for an action movie and for one that's all got it's out of exploitation. So the exploitation genre is sex and violence, really. And so women rape, and you get people monstered, and yet there's also something very learned underneath it in the writing. So you've got the collapse of civilization. And in fact, the opening scene I at first wanted to show because it recounts the collapse of civilization. And you're a fair way in before you're hearing about something that isn't happening now. And it's all very chilling. And then they put you in this world post the collapse of civilization. And then road rage is another theme. I mean, it's road rage to the max. It did world building. Not all the films do it. Like Die Hard builds a situation, but it doesn't build a world. This is an alternative reality where everywhere is desolate, where the people deliberately speak very little because A, there's nothing to talk about, and B, it's just business only, which again makes for a film that you may not notice, but there's very little talking in it. Almost pure cinema, a bit like Spielberg's Duel. Except that the music is beautiful. And then the punk aesthetic, that's something that's out in the culture. I think, the Mad Max post-apocalypse, somehow they all have great hairdressing for colored mohawks and such in that world. So it's an achievement at levels, and the editing, I cannot. How much time have I got? Yeah, okay. Well, I won't run off about them out about these bloody awful car chases where you don't even know where you are on the road or who's where because they're too busy cutting from one close up of the thing to another. But Mad Max here is impeccable at letting you always know where you are. It's beautifully shot. Dean Semler, I've heard speak, and he was later tapped to shoot Waterworld, which is cute because that was like a lame rip-off of Waterworld. Many people think the whole plot, except that instead of a little kid who never talks, there's a little girl who never shuts up, and you've got the mariner. Instead of a really cool car, he's got a cool yacht. But it's all like 10 times the cost for the sake of being a lot sillier. However, he was tapped to do that, to Dances with Wolves, and I've never gotten to mention Australian cinematographers, but they were a part of this wave. And John Seale is another one. Russell Boyd, Don McAlpine, and they get the look of the outback out there. The music, actually, it's always classic music. I would say almost all of these have great music, but that's not to be taken for granted. And I'm not sure the music is good in movies these days. Yeah.
Brian May did the soundtrack, and it's not the Brian May from Queen either.
Yeah, no, no, that's right. It was an ABC composer. It's often, and it's a beautiful score, often very gentle, actually. And finally, it's a hobby horse we've talked about before, which is the stunts. It's just real cars and real trucks driving at those speeds over each other, into each other. The stunts are real guys flying through the air. One of them scored a broken leg on a shot they always use. He flips through the air, head over, like this, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And that's because he caught his foot when his bike hit the obstacle, and actually he broke his ankle on the way through. But whatever, he got up. He was doing stunts the next day. The things they do with cars, I mean, it's shocking and it's awesome. So the legacy is, in no particular order, he's got a video game out, if you're into that. Cosplay, real favorite, the Mad Max and also Warrior Woman sort of pairing when it's costume night. Mad Max 3 and 4 did their best. Mad Max 3 was done in a great atmosphere of sadness because Byron Kennedy, he'd been a partnership with George Miller, and it was Kennedy Miller, the miracle production company in Australia. For some years, they were doing miniseries and everything in the 80s. And Byron was the one who said, this will be a soundtrack you can feel. Byron was the one who said, yeah, let's just take that truck and run it at full speed. And he was a young guy who unfortunately died young just after Mad Max 2. And a school friend of mine was in the helicopter with him when he crashed, and he died in the night. And so Mad Max 3 was made on sad hearts, and it's not a good movie. I think Fury Road, number 4, is a masterpiece. You be the judge. Waterworld, I mentioned, that did rip it off directly. There's all these other films that reference it, often for jokes. The Simpsons did it, like go out to Australia and, oh, look, it's Mad Max happening out there. There are festivals that never die. There's a museum of Mad Max at Broken Hill where they filmed it. And I keep hearing this phrase that it is simply one of the greatest action films ever made. So there you are. And with that, I tried to buy just 3 minutes of time because I couldn't see anything you'd want to cut in the clip from Road Warrior, which hardly speaks, but it's like an action film in a bubble because it starts with two sides threatening each other and it ends with a massive explosion.
Control copy, right? Control
Yeah.
and then control what?
Control
V. What is V supposed to stand?
taste.
I think they already.
Paste starts
Control
with a
P
V.
stands for
Okay, I got it.
print. They already had control P for
I
print.
know,
so they had-
that's why I went into the Mac or PC, doesn't really think there's through. Very well. Funny stuff. Explosions always look better in slow motion.
maybe I'm missing the point, but why couldn't they just use like horses or donkeys
For what?
instead of having cars? Like that logically, it would make more sense to have like a horsey or.
No, it didn't. How fast can a horse go?
Horses don't need gas though.
True.
Maybe the horses die.
Do you see where that is? There's no water there. Horses need water, horses need grass. That's desert.
So
The
do people
Australian
though.
outback. I don't know, in any of the Mad Max movies, do they ride horses ever? Dave?
No, I don't think there's anything that big living. You know,
It's
it's
a
like,
good point. I would think if in reality, if you had that post-apocalypse. But one thing about Australia, and if you've never been there, it's this enormous continent with most of it is desert, and this the whole outskirts, the whole rim is nice and green and verdant. So this is I don't know where they shot this, but this is somewhere in the outback, I am sure, and nothing grows there. You know, I mean, it is desolate, and it's a great place to go blow stuff up, no doubt, but probably not a good place for a horse. Even a crocodile Dundee, he doesn't ride a horse. You know, I mean, so do they ride horses in the outback?
no, there's camels that got free 100 years ago, and they're still out there. All sorts of weird things can happen in the outback.
So why didn't you ride a camel? Because it wouldn't be that much fun.
Yeah.
Camel chasing a camel, okay.
Yeah, to be fair, I have seen others raise the question of why in a world where fuel is so rare is everybody driving the biggest gas guzzlers they can find.
Yeah, no, it's an analogy. That's logical. This is it's an allegory. I would think broad strokes, characters, you know, good versus evil, and maybe the fact that Max is driving the gas guzzler, he's kind of like, you know, he's going against the grain, but he's also the one who can find where the fuel is. The thing about this road warrior story is there is fuel. You just got to get to it, and it's control. Okay, it's control. And I think Fury Road doesn't really get to the source of the fuel.
Yeah. Oh, the water. Comes down to water in Fury Road.
But ultimately, these are good questions, but I don't think they really thought about that. They thought about how cool it was. Sweet.
Yeah. It is a bit of a case of we know what we're going to do, so let's just justify that.
It's kind of like, you know, why does the villain put like James Bond in like a room instead of kill him? Okay, we'll just put you in this room and lock you up, Mr. Bond, and then the next thing you know, he escapes, you know, or Batman or whatever. They're not going to get a chance to kill him. No, we're going to lock him up so he can escape and come back and kill us. And that's just a conceit, you know, on these kind of superhero type of movies, you know. I think it's why Die Hard works so well is because there was none of that. There was no catching McClane and putting him in a room or whatever. As a matter of fact, if they ever did catch him, they did want to kill him. You know? And there's that scene in the middle where Gruber, he doesn't know what he looks like, but he pretends he puts on a fake accent. Oh, I'm so scared of guns and all that. And I think that's feasible. I mean, it's not like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. That's a very feasible, really well-written part. You know, you put them together, they don't even know who they are. Even the Smokey and the Bandit, he sits next to Jackie Gleason, sits next to Burt Reynolds, and he has no idea that's the guy he's chasing. So it is a nice little conceit if you could put that in, you know, dramatically in your film. All right, we're just wrapped for today. Thanks, David, for your.
Welcome.
Next week, we're going to start with you guys, so I'm going to put that out today or tomorrow. As soon as I got everybody's like weighing in on when they want to go, and I guess there's 6 more of you guys that still need to talk to. And that includes all you guys that are black boxes online. I forget who the 2 are. I know one of them's Taylor. Yeah, I'm not sure who the other one is. So. But so far the meetings have gone great. I think I love your energy, and I just want you to bring that, have fun with this. I don't expect you to be David Hansen or Roger Ebert or Janet Maslin, serious, but, get into doing a serious analogy of a piece of art. And a serious analogy is, I don't like those kind of movies. A serious analogy is, okay, how does this fit in context with the 80s and with cinema? I mean, why is this film significant, important? You guys had many to choose from. You picked that one for a reason. Other than you like it, what about it do you think how it fits in that puzzle piece of cinema of the 80s? And now that we've gone over every genre, you kind of get an idea of the types of films that came out in the different genres. The direction, you've all seen horror movies in the 21st century. You've seen Fast and Furious action movies. Notice, none of those Fast and Furious made the top 25, and there's like 20 of them, all right? So, and this was made in 2007 after many of them were made, so. Entertainment Magazine thought Fast and Furious is crap, obviously. I think probably maybe one of them deserved to make it, but it's a pretty good list. Because I go back to like The Adventures of Robin Hood, is in there. 1999, spoken to Spider-Man 2, Predator. That's a good, some really good films in there. So, all right. So other than that, I know you guys got to go to class. Yeah. I'm probably going to do day one next week. We'll start live in class and see how that goes. Okay. I'm probably going to like to do one here all the time anyway. So even if you guys are zooming in to do it, if you guys want to come to class and watch it on the big screen, that's cool. I think that's probably the best way, because I've got classes already running home, then run back to do another 6 o'clock class. Any questions, guys? Anybody? All right. I will see everybody.
I want us to tell you like which dates.
Whether you wanted to go virtual or not.
I wanted to do it in person, but not next week.
Yeah.
Well, there's gonna be in person
Okay,
on days too.
okay.
But
Do you want
we're
us
gonna
to?
have to have 4 people go next week, whether you like it or not, okay?
Yeah, just put it on
There was an
the
announcement
thing
where
for
we
graduating now next week, 2 exams.
They don't mind me.
I'm going first, I just got test before and after, so I don't know, like, worry about it.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, I got-
I know I got that.
Maybe
I
you should
saw
start
that.
early just in case. Yeah.
Oh, you just,
I just.
I thought you were there, I sworn you already were at my list.
I was on the one that's planned.
Oh, you had to sign up, so you're the one, okay, cool. I'm glad, and that's for next Thursday? Next Thursday, not Tuesday. This coming Thursday. Gives me a chance to watch the thing again, because I haven't seen it in 30 years, okay. That's a cool movie though.
I just put down, preferably not next week, because I have 2 exams this week, and I got some family stuff, so I might have to be doing some back and forth. And I wanna make sure that I can make it a good presentation, so, an extra week.
You'll do fine regardless.
Well, just if possible.
Yeah, I just gotta see. I mean, it doesn't matter, we gotta go with 4 people next week, whether it's virtual or not virtual.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanna let you know that preferably, if possible, I
Okay.
appreciate it.
All right. See you, Professor. See you, David.
Hey, Connor.
All right, sir.
Good.
All right, so this should be recorded. I wonder if I could get you a copy of this so you can use it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you. That was felt better.